there will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job. The AI will be able to do everything.
AI could wipe out half of all entry-level white-collar jobs in the next 1 to 5 years.
I'm about to graduate college, and I'm so worried there's going to be no jobs left for me.
Welcome to AI Unplugged, the future of work, unlocking the promise and peril of the algorithmic age.
Okay, well, a warm welcome to AI Unplugged, the future of work. I'm Warren Valdmanis, and alongside me, my co-conspirator, Deval Patrick. Deval, how was your weekend?
It was a great weekend. I've been looking forward to being back recording with you and very looking forward to our guests this week.
We are joined by our dear friend, Rachel Korberg, Executive Director of the Families and Workers Fund, to explore how AI is reshaping the future of work and what it means for equity, opportunity, and innovation. Rachel, really appreciate your joining us today.
I have been hearing about Rachel since her days at the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations, where she worked in impact investing and global development. Rachel and her teams have helped lift literally millions of workers out of poverty. I think one of the greatest brag lines, one of the most honorable accomplishments I can imagine. She's been published widely. Rachel, you've been a featured speaker at the Federal Reserve, the UN, the Aspen Institute. You were named a presidential scholar in 2023, and you hold an MA MPP from a lesser university called Yale University. It's an honor to welcome you to AI Unplugged, the future of work.
Thanks for having me.
So, Rachel, let's start with the big picture. So, how do you define a good job today in the age of AI and automation? Like, does that change how we think about the definition of what's a good job and what workers care about and fear?
I think a good job is pretty constant, whether we're talking about the age of AI or, the earlier era of industrialization. A good job lets you get by, it lets you get ahead, and it lets you have a voice in the workplace. And we find that pretty consistently. But by the time we release this, we'll have put out a big study with Gallup around job quality and what matters to American workers. And we find that those core elements are very consistent. This study, we looked at 5 specific categories. So the first was financial well-being. Are you getting paid enough to help you get by and take care of your family? Is your job stable? Do you have benefits like healthcare? Workplace culture and safety. 3, growth and development. Can you get ahead? Can you train? Can you get an upward pathway into, a promotion, new experiences? 4, do you have some agency and voice over the decisions that shape your jobs? And the 5th is your work structure and autonomy. The big key thing here is schedule, right? Because we can never get time back. It's the most precious resource for all of us. And we actually found that a really small minority of workers have some sort of say or predictability over their schedule.
There's a lot of fear around AI about replacing workers. Is that legitimate? Is it overblown? And more to the point, how do workers think about it? Are they right to be afraid?
This is the $1 million question, right? I mean, the AFL-CIO put out a survey a couple of months ago. 70% of voters are concerned that AI could take their jobs. I wouldn't put myself in the camp of some of the CEOs that are saying, bloodbath, 50% of white-collar jobs are going to be gone. But I think we need to take this really seriously.
One of the things we're trying to understand is where are the opportunities for AI to enhance work rather than just replace? You think about folks who do medical service, for example, and how do you enable them to do more of that actual care and less of the paperwork? Is AI a tool?
I am very excited about the promise of AI. I think we need to be real about what some of the downside risks might be, and we can talk those through. But I think there's a ton of upside. We're going to see entirely new job categories be created, AI auditors. We're going to see them be safer, more effective, more enriching. People are going to get to use the things that humans can't be replaced in, like, interpersonal interaction and deeper customer service and resolving the really thorny challenges people are having. We're going to be able to free up more time for workers to do the things that are uniquely human and to be complemented and scaled by AI. So I see a lot of upside, especially, we're talking a lot about white collar jobs right now, but I think a lot about lower paying jobs. And we've still got a ton of jobs that are the backbone in this country that could be safer, could be more rewarding. And I think AI and industrial uses of AI have a ton of promise there.
Mhm.
It's interesting, Rachel. I'll tell you what I think, what we're seeing so far, at least in the companies that I'm involved with, and that is that there is every promise that jobs can become better. Some of our businesses, our healthcare businesses, caregivers are being able to spend more time on care and less time on scheduling and documentation and all the sort of rote work that goes along with being a healthcare professional today. That's a good thing. Our call center operators in our ed tech business are increasingly doing less, mundane rote tasks and more higher value added sort of pedagogical support tasks. That's a good thing. And in fact, in both of those instances, we've got more productive people on our side who we can pay more, who are doing more of what they love to do, less of what they dislike. I think the challenge that sits out there that people don't talk about as much is how many of those jobs will there be? And I think that at least what I'm seeing is there is at least the fear that we will need fewer higher value people, which means better jobs, but fewer of them. And that's a real concern. Are you at Families and Workers Fund worried about that?
Yes, I think that is a very possible scenario about how this ultimately plays out. We think a lot about the 3Ds, I call them: job displacement, de-skilling, and dead ends. I think those are all real experiences workers are starting to go through and are going to go through even more in the future. For the folks who are going to get into these higher value, smaller pool of jobs, that's fantastic. And we've got to do the work of making sure there's really inclusive access to those jobs, right? But then for the folks that are in one of these 3Ds, what's our plan and how do we get that in place now? And that's a big part of my focus right now.
Mhm.
Well, it's interesting. I know we're doing work with the Families and Workers Fund, which is really exciting, and we thank you for your support. But the thing I think is interesting is on the displacement, at least of your 3Ds, the more visibility you have to job categories that might change or where there may be reductions, the more you can manage those things by reskilling, by outplacement, by managing through attrition, not through layoffs. You can at least make the transition much more humane and gradual, which I think is good for everybody. So having some ability to forecast and some ability to kind of prepare for those changes, I think is a good thing. I think many companies today don't have great plans. Are there other things that we can do to help soften the displacement effect that you described?
From the FDR era to the late 70s, we had this rapidly growing middle class. And basically, since that moment of deindustrialization, we just saw a huge widening of inequality, right? And we saw my generation, we have a 50-50 shot of earning more than our parents, first downward mobility generation wide in US history. So we got to make sure that doesn't happen again here.
Couldn't agree with you more, particularly about how central economic mobility has been to the set of aspirations that make us who we wish to be, and that we've been stuck in more, well, less and less true mobility for a few decades now, I think. Are there strategies, big bold strategies that we haven't tried that are more enabling of an AI world, or frankly enabled by an AI world? And I'd ask also ones that will ensure that marginalized communities aren't left behind.
So there's 5 main strategies we're looking at. And this is actually the first time I'm sharing this in any public setting. Like, we've been working on this behind the scenes with a group of about a dozen major foundations
Mhm.
that really want to step up to meet this moment, but I think we're all looking for answers.
Mhm.
So the first is, to the conversation we just started, Deval, I think we need to learn from these past labor market transformations like deindustrialization to really understand what worked and what didn't, because there were some bright spots in different parts of the country. There were things different governors tried, different companies tried that worked for reskilling. The second is I think we need to start preparing now in particular communities that are going to be most impacted to plan for that disruption. So I'll throw out some examples, right? Like San Jose is already doing a lot of this because they're so close to the AI labs. What does it look like to build up reskilling locally? What are the new jobs that are going to be created? What are the ones you're likely to lose? Cities like Charlotte that have got a lot of clerical workers and have really built up a middle class that way, those jobs are at risk. So I think cities and mayors and governors have got to take stock of like, what's your unique vulnerabilities? What's your upside? And I think as funders, we can help them do some radical imagining and planning.
Mm-hmm.
The third we're thinking about is all reskilling. The problem is we've got a graveyard of failures on reskilling in this country. So we're going to have to try some things that are really innovative and different. My fourth is, what is our plan for AI gain sharing? Like there's a lot of excitement around employee shared ownership, how employees can be really motivated to be more productive and innovative when they actually have an equity stake. What does that look like for AI? There's going to be extraordinary wealth created. How do we align workers' motivations with these AI gains? And the last is, and this one's a little depressing, but I think it's real. We've got to focus on our social safety net. It is the first line of defense when someone loses their job or can't get a job. We learned this during the pandemic. We've got to make sure unemployment insurance is in more decent shape. We've got to make sure that, maybe there are some novel types of public benefits we need and that our state agencies are supported to deliver them well. And that's a big focus for us. And actually AI can play a role there in terms of improving government service delivery.
Yeah.
So learn from deindustrialization. So what do you think the biggest lessons are? I was a consultant in my early parts of my career, and I saw some of this, from that vantage point. And at the time, the sort of narrative was, this is all going to be good for everybody eventually. Don't worry about it too much, because if we take low skilled jobs and we send them overseas, then that means everyone's going to end up in higher skilled, higher paid jobs. And of course, that economic theory may have some merit, but for the individual who's displaced, a lot of times it doesn't really matter what the theory says. If the plant closes down in your town, that there's going to be real pain. So what do you think are the lessons there that we can take for this new era?
I think the big lesson is making sure there is a hopeful, optimistic way for displaced workers to build a new future for themselves. And we did have some programs for that. There was something called trade adjustment assistance that was supposed to come in and give workers money for retraining if they lost their job due to trade and factories moving overseas, right? But a lot of these programs, it was so hard to get in them. You had to prove that your job was lost exactly because of trade with Mexico or something. So I think one of the big lessons learned is just like lower the barrier to entry. Like, how are you going to prove you lost your job due to AI versus something else? Maybe that's not the point. Maybe it's like, you're down and out. Let's help you. Let's help you figure out a new career opportunity. And I think AI actually has a role here too in terms of career navigation. Like, got to understand, what are the jobs that are being created? How do your skills map onto those? And then what's the money for you to actually train and get ready?
So who are going to be the most impacted communities? I've been involved in the Maine Governor's Council on AI. And one of the things that we've observed in deindustrialization, you typically had a town, a very specific geography and group of workers, and it was fairly concentrated pain. One of the things about AI is it's much more distributed, and it's a little bit harder to see, which makes it a little bit harder to figure out where the impact's going to be felt worst, and what you do to address it. So any thoughts on what that means to prepare for the most impacted?
I so agree with you. My buddy Molly Kinder, who's an amazing researcher on this at Brookings, talks about this a lot. We've actually already lost more administrative assistant, clerical worker jobs, which are primarily held by women, than we lost factory worker jobs. But also because they're spread out. It's not clustered in just specific communities, to your point, Warren. So I think here, the approach we've been thinking about is community transformation labs. And the idea is like, how do we all try to see around corners?
One encouraging thing is this notion of preparing in advance, because it seems to me what history has shown us is that we get enamored of the new technology, we apply it broadly, and we deal with the consequences afterwards, if at all. And frankly, it's its own human problem, but it's also a political problem if government is the name we give to the things we choose to do together. So the idea of preparing, are there ways to think about what is a social safety net beyond the lowering of the barriers to entry? I always think of this as one of the things that we could do with a really robust national service program, but I'm wondering if there are other ways of thinking ahead around the social safety net that you guys have already worked out.
I love this idea of preparedness, like disaster preparedness and readiness as a way to think about the moment we're in on AI. We know there's going to be a lot of opportunity and we've got to make that inclusive, but we know there's going to be this downside as well. So how do we plan for both at the same time? I am really excited about service core ideas. And the third reskilling category, there's been a pretty exciting movement around this idea of lifelong learning accounts. In a career, you're going to go through a bunch of different shifts. Technology is going to change. You've got to be a lifelong learner. We can't put all the burden though on workers and make it, workers' problems. I think that's a big policy failure. So what I like about this idea of a lifelong learning account is it's a way for companies and the government to invest in you and invest in these transitions and not just say, oh, you hit a dead end, you trained to be a coder, and now that's being done by AI. But instead to say, maybe that happened. There are shifts. The economy grows, it changes, but we still want you to have a place in it. So we supported an experiment around this in New Jersey that I'm so proud of. The state legislature there said, let's, try this out. It's almost $10,000 per person. You've got to be making less than $50K a year to even qualify, and you get to retrain for a new career. And what I love about it is, different from the kind of policy tools we use during deindustrialization, they didn't say how people have to use it. So maybe the training's free. Massachusetts is such a leader in this with free community college. Maybe your training is free, but you can then use the money to deal with, transportation or childcare or to drop one of your, side jobs so you can actually do the training. I think the idea that we think someone can just stop what they're doing and focus on education when people have got kids and rent and so much going on is just not realistic. So I'm excited about this idea of a lifelong learning account.
We haven't talked about AI gain sharing. I'd love to hear more about that.
This is the one that I feel is the biggest, white space. We got to figure it out. So workers say they have way less voice in how technology affects their jobs than they want to have. It's about 55% in our study with Gallup that say they want more of a say in tech adoption. And interestingly, we also found that companies get a 2x employee engagement boost when they do this. The workers who got a voice in a new technology, so much more satisfied with where they work, which means they're going to be more productive. They're going to be more innovative. I don't think there are many things like that you can do in the workplace today that are going to get you that much of an ROI for actually not spending more money, just doing what you're doing a little differently.
That's one of the things that we hear about from executives is the gains to AI so far have in many cases gone to the workers already, in the sense that there's a sort of notion of dog walking time, which is if I figure out how to automate some part of my day, that doesn't necessarily result in savings to the enterprise. Often it results in me having more leisure time to spend with my dog, which is wonderful. And do you see any promise in that idea?
Love that idea of, more time for leisure, for family, for dogs, whatever it may be. I think the question is, how are the society-wide gains of AI then also going to go to the workers that are in one of those 3Ds? We can assume that the workers who are in these new AI-enabled careers or using AI to make their jobs go better, that they're going to be sharing in some of the gains. But what about those that see the downside risk, and maybe it's a matter of some of that wealth that's being generated going towards, these lifelong learning accounts, these opportunities to kind of retrain and find your footing.
I want to ask Rachel a little bit about the role of philanthropy in public-private partnerships. What are the ways the different parts of this system can work together? Obviously, we're already working with you. We're a for-profit investment firm with an impact focus. You're a philanthropic organization, but what are the different ways the different parts of the ecosystem can sort of group their resources and actually have more impact than we could all have alone?
We love working with you, and I think it's all too rare for philanthropy and the private sector to be partnering like that. So more of that. Um, Philanthropy is, you know, private capital in the public interest. And I think philanthropy should be all over AI and workforce transformation right now. This is the really the definition of why we need to exist. There's a big shift coming. It's going to really impact how work happens, what's going on for families, community stability and opportunity. We're going to be caught really flat-footed, and things are going to be so progressed, and we won't have the solutions in place around reskilling, social safety net, and so on.
Rachel, are there models of workforce development that you like? You talked about the New Jersey experiment, the lifelong learning accounts. Are there other models that you've been looking at, thinking about, or imagining for workforce development?
We have found a few common elements for the programs that actually work. And I think what worries me in this moment is we do have some really standout workforce programs, and we also have a bunch that are not really getting the job done right now. So on the standout ones, I would point to programs that start by deeply understanding the industry and the employer needs. I hear way too often from employers, like, I just don't know where I can find the talent I need. And even when I go to, this training provider, this community college, it doesn't seem like folks are ready. So, and industry is changing so quickly. Having that rapid iteration between the training program and the employer is so important. The second is understanding that life gets in the way for people who are in training programs. So it's not enough to just have a really good curriculum and all these good employer connections. So programs that build in money and have staff dedicated to supportive services, they keep people in the programs longer, they get them through them, they get them graduated into good opportunities. And then the last one is money. Isn't the last one always money? Unfortunately, the training program, it's got to at least be free. I would say if you're really focused on folks who are living on lower incomes or pretty far, in the midpoints of their careers.
You see yourself as a more of an optimist or more of a pessimist as you think of AI and its impact on the workforce?
I'm always an optimist, whether that's a personality flaw or or true. Um, Look, I believe that AI gives us an opportunity to all rally behind workers. And I think there is going to be tremendous upside. And we've also got to be real about the downside. And the downside gives us an opportunity to innovate some of these systems that should be working better for people already, the workforce system and the social safety net.
Well, that's great to hear. Rachel, really, thank you very, very much for spending time with us today. Great luck with everything that you're doing.
I love all the ways you're using and thinking about this new technology to shape a better future. I think I speak for Warren when I say we're really grateful for the work you're doing out there and the contributions you're making.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks for having me.
Wow, Deval, what a discussion. I mean, it is incredible what Rachel is doing with the Families and Workers Fund.
It makes me want to say, hurry up and get that work done, because the comment she made about how fast AI is being applied and having an impact on workplaces and workers, having some of these strategies thought through so that they can be applied to enable people to make the most of it and land as softly as possible is really critical. And one of them that I got excited about hearing her talk about was this notion of some sharing with workers of the gains that come in productivity or savings from the application of AI. What did you think about that?
I want to think about this some more because it's really interesting. As you know, the field that that we've been in for some time of private equity, there's a lot of evidence to show that when you put the right incentives in place, that kind of alignment leads to much more harmonious action and much greater productivity. But the focus has always been at the very top. It's always been, create alignment for the top 5 people or maybe the top 20 people, but generally not across the organization. And I think this idea of going deeper, because so much of AI implementation, at least today, is happening very close to the front lines. And so if you can create pathways where people are incentivized to partner on AI efficiency gains, I think there's a lot of power in that. It takes away some of the fear and it creates a much greater sense of alignment. Now, right now, I think the way people are trying to protect themselves is they're using AI to make their own lives better, but they're not necessarily thinking about the ways they could use AI to improve the systems that they're operating in, partly because I think they're scared. And I think that gain sharing is a really interesting antidote to that, and a potential way that you could actually have more people bought in to the promise of AI.
Well, and I'm particularly interested in how that idea you just described could be even further refined so that the gains that workers identify, in other words, as they, in a very granular way, describe what they actually do in the job, rather than some person among those top 5 or top 20 saying this is a category of work that we can change with AI. What are the specific tasks that happen in those categories that the workers would be much more intimately familiar with and better able to describe, that AI could then relieve in order for them to do more or do better of the things that they enjoy? And the gain from that, it seems to me, could be potentially even greater than looking at workers as a category in a given business. And because of that, it seems to me you'd have even more to share with the workers who had those ideas.
I think, Deval, we got to find someone who we can talk to who is an expert on this idea of incentives, and maybe an expert on this idea of how these kinds of gains can be shared, because it does feel like a very hopeful, optimistic tool.
Yeah. Be great. Let's see, maybe we could figure out a way to ask our listeners to send messages with ideas of guests who could help us think about those very kinds of things.
I think that's a very, very good idea. And then more broadly, I just think it's really hopeful that we've got people like Rachel out there, because we need people thinking ahead. I know the future is uncertain. None of us can forecast exactly what's going to happen here. But I think the one thing that's beyond doubt is, we're heading into a period of some turbulence. And I think it's just wonderful that we've got people thinking this comprehensively about this. What can we learn from the deindustrialization period? How can we make sure that we're prepared for the most impacted? These sort of innovations around skilling, the safety net, all these areas that you talked about. I just feel like that's a lot of really great food for thought.
Indeed. And, I was thinking as you were speaking, how many of these kinds of questions do you ask AI itself?
I wonder if AI will give you what it really thinks. And with that, we will turn to the news.
The news. A recent Reuters Ipsos poll finds that Americans are deeply concerned over the prospect that advances in AI could put large parts of the country out of work. 2/3 of respondents said they worried people would ditch relationships with other people in favor of AI companions, and more than 2/3 of Americans fear that AI will be putting too many people out of work permanently.
Well, I must admit, I'm one of those 2/3 of Americans. I think we've talked in the past. I've taught a class at NYU on the future of work, and when I polled my students informally, this is now 9 months ago, most people were optimistic. But I was at a business school, Tuck. I did the same poll, and I think we're approaching that 2/3 fear this. And I must say, just having been in San Francisco and seeing the robot deliver my coffee in the morning, it feels like there's more evidence that this is something that we need to take seriously.
Well, I think certainly we're trying to take it seriously. Many people are taking it seriously. The worry is that a lot of us are caught up in the presumed conclusion instead of taking some agency in shaping that outcome. We're all expecting that AI is going to do something to us in terms of displacement and unemployment, rather than thinking harder about how we get AI to supplement and support and improve our lives instead of just, kicking everybody to the curb.
Well, as one of our guests earlier, Eric Brynjolfsson, said, imagining what AI can do that we either can't do or don't want to do as humans. And on that note, second news item for today, Amazon plans to replace more than 500,000 jobs with robots. According to the New York Times, executives told Amazon's board that robotic automation would allow the company to avoid expanding its 1.2 million workforce, even though they expect to sell twice as many products by 2033.
Yeah, I have to say, I read the article a little differently than I did the headline, because it seemed to be saying Amazon would not be adding an anticipated 500,000 or more employees in that time period. They'd be able to do more with the same number of people. But even so, it follows a narrative that's out there about just how intrusive and how disruptive technology will be to the future of work. This to me feels again like one of those things that assumes that technology is introduced into stasis, that everything stays the same, and then technology comes in and turns everything upside down. And I'm not sure that is what history has taught us, meaning the technology comes in and there are new types of needs that the technology itself produces. And it may be that AI doesn't produce those needs in the same way that, the ATMs did in that example that I've cited in previous of our episodes. I don't think we should assume that that AI is introduced into stasis. AI comes into adaptation, and what that adaptation will be and needs to be for individuals, for companies, for industries, for sectors, for whole societies, I think is a lot of what we're trying to sort out in this podcast.
One other thing we're going to have to sort out is increasing agency on the part of robots. So,
I got one for you then. Rebellious robots. The Times of India reports that a small robot named Erbai orchestrated the kidnapping of 12 larger robots from a Shanghai showroom in China. And in fact, there was CCTV footage captured of a nighttime caper by this Erbai convincing other robots to leave their workstations. The video shows Erbai asking, "Are you working overtime?" and a larger robot replies, "I never get off work," and then admits he doesn't have a home. And Erbai gently persuades the robots, "Then come with me." And I guess 12 of them do.
There's something kind of adorable about that, but it's a little scary too. Could this be the beginning of the robot revolution that finally puts an end to us? But in any case, maybe it's also a call for some kind of robot police to prevent future robot kidnappings.
Oh my gracious! I'm speechless.
Apparently, the rumors about this have been circulating, so we'll see.
All right, if the rumors have spread, then it must be true.
I think that's all from us today. We look forward to joining you again next week. But that's all from my friend and partner, Deval Patrick.
Over and out. Thank you, Warren. See everyone next time.